I worked for Oprah Winfrey. I was part of her inner circle for 5 years, and I signed NDAs that have finally expired. What I witnessed during that time has destroyed my ability to watch television, to listen to music, to believe anything I see on a screen. Because Oprah told me something that still makes my hands shake when I think about it. She looked me directly in the eyes and said, "The real Beyoncé never made it out. I know what that means now. And after today, you will too." The year was 2008, and I was 26 years old when I received the call that would change my life forever. A recruiter from Harpo Productions wanted to speak with me about a position in Oprah's private team. Not the studio team, not the magazine team. Her private team. The people who existed in the spaces the cameras never reached. The interview process was unlike anything I had experienced. 3 rounds of interviews, each more intense than the last. They asked strange questions. How did I handle secrets? Had I ever broken a confidence? What would I do if I witnessed something that contradicted my understanding of reality? I remember laughing nervously at that last one, thinking it was some kind of psychological test. The woman across from me did not laugh back. She just wrote something down in her leather notebook and moved on. When they finally offered me the position, it came with a stack of paperwork thicker than my college thesis. Non-disclosure agreements, confidentiality clauses, legal documents that used words like perpetuity and irreversible consequences. I signed everything. I was young, I was ambitious, and this was Oprah, the woman who could make or break careers with a single recommendation. The woman whose book club could turn unknown authors into millionaires overnight. I would have signed away anything to be in her orbit. My role was officially titled Private Events Coordinator, but that barely scratched the surface of what the job actually entailed. I managed Oprah's interactions with high-profile celebrities during private dinners, intimate gatherings at her estates, and confidential business meetings that the public would never hear about. I coordinated travel for her most important guests. I ensured that everything in her private world ran with absolute precision and total secrecy. The first 3 months were intoxicating. I stood in rooms with people whose faces were on billboards and magazine covers. I overheard conversations about film deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I watched legends laugh and drink wine and be human in ways their audiences never got to see. It felt like I had been given access to a secret level of reality that existed above the ordinary world. But there were rules. So many rules. Never speak to celebrities unless they spoke to you first. Never mention anything you saw or heard to anyone outside the team, including family. Never take photographs. Never keep a personal diary or journal about your work. And most importantly, if you witnessed anything unusual, anything that seemed off, you reported it immediately to your supervisor. No exceptions. I did not understand that last rule at first. What could possibly be unusual at a private dinner party? But I would learn soon enough. The first time I saw Beyoncé in person was at an intimate gathering at Oprah's Montecito estate in December of 2008. There were maybe 20 guests total. Industry titans, A-list actors, musicians whose songs I had grown up listening to. And there she was, Beyoncé Knowles Carter. She wore a simple cream-colored dress, her hair pulled back, minimal makeup. She was somehow more beautiful in person than she appeared in photographs, which seemed impossible. I was stationed near the bar, managing drink requests and ensuring everything flowed smoothly. I watched her interact with the other guests. She was warm, gracious, laughing at jokes and touching people's arms when she spoke to them. Everything about her seemed perfect, practiced, like watching a masterclass in charm. But then I saw something that made my stomach twist in a way I could not explain. Beyoncé had separated from the main group and stood alone near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. In her hand was a glass of champagne she had not touched. She was staring at something on the piano. As I moved closer, pretending to adjust some flowers nearby, I saw what had captured her attention. Photographs. Oprah had dozens of framed photographs displayed throughout the house, and this particular cluster showed Beyoncé herself through the years, Destiny's Child era, her first solo album. Red carpet moments. She was staring at these images of herself with an expression I have never forgotten. It was not nostalgia. It was not fondness. It was complete and total disconnection. Like she was looking at photographs of a stranger. Her face had gone slack, empty, and there was something in her eyes that made my blood run cold. Confusion, fear, and something else I could not name. Then she sensed me watching. Her head turned toward me with mechanical precision, and in an instant, everything changed. The warmth flooded back into her face. The smile returned. She lifted her champagne glass toward me in a small, friendly gesture and rejoined the party as if nothing had happened. But I had seen it. That momentary void, that brief, terrifying absence. I told myself I had imagined it. I told myself she was tired or tipsy or lost in thought. But deep down, in a place I did not want to acknowledge, I knew I had witnessed something deeply wrong. What I did not know was that I would see it again and again. Come 6 months into my position, I was called into a meeting I had not been expecting. My supervisor, a woman named Patricia, who had worked for Oprah for over 15 years, sat me down in a windowless office I had never been inside before. On the desk between us was a black leather journal, the kind with a lock on it. Patricia slid the journal across the desk toward me. She did not smile. She did not offer any pleasantries. She simply said that my role was expanding and that what we were about to discuss could never leave this room. I nodded, my heart already racing. The journal was a log, a documentation system, and my new responsibility was to maintain it with absolute precision and complete discretion. Anytime certain high-profile individuals attended events or stayed at any of Oprah's properties, I was to observe them carefully. And if I noticed anything unusual, anything that deviated from normal behavior, I was to document it immediately with timestamps, descriptions, and context. I asked what qualified as unusual. Patricia's answer made my mouth go dry. Disorientation, memory lapses, references to themselves in third person, moments where they seemed not to recognize people they should know, extended periods of staring or dissociation, sudden personality shifts, any indication that they were not fully present. There was a list of names, 12 celebrities who required this level of monitoring. Beyoncé's name was at the top, underlined twice. Patricia explained that this was not surveillance in a sinister sense. These were individuals operating under immense pressure, she said. The level of fame they experienced could create psychological strain that the public never saw. Oprah cared deeply about these people, and this system existed to ensure their well-being, to catch warning signs before they became full breakdowns. It all sounded reasonable when Patricia explained it, compassionate even. But then she showed me the archives. 3 filing cabinets stood against the wall, each drawer labeled with years. Patricia pulled open the drawer marked 2003 through 2007. Inside were dozens of identical black journals, each one filled with entries from previous assistants, previous coordinators, previous people who had held my exact position before moving on or being moved out. She handed me one at random. I opened it to a page dated April 2006. The entry was about Beyoncé, documented during a private recording session at a studio Oprah owned in Chicago. The assistant had written, "Subject appeared confused when shown photographs from her wedding 6 months prior. Asked who the man in the photos was before recognition seemed to click into place. Delay was approximately 8 seconds. Logged as level 2 incident." My hands started shaking. I flipped to another page. January 2007. Subject referred to herself as the performance 3 times during casual conversation. When asked to clarify, subject laughed it off but appeared distressed. Avoided eye contact for remainder of evening. Level 2 incident. Another entry. Another assistant's handwriting. March 2005. Subject did not recognize her own mother during video call. Stared at screen with visible confusion for nearly 30 seconds before assistance was required from her team to reorient. Her. Level 4 incident. I looked up at Patricia, my voice barely working. I asked what the levels meant. She explained calmly, as if discussing weather patterns. Level 1 was minor. A brief moment of disconnection, easily explained by exhaustion or distraction. Level 2 indicated a more significant break from reality. Level 3 involved distress, panic, or the subject explicitly asking for help. Level 4 meant a complete break, requiring intervention from specialists. And Level 5? Patricia's face darkened when I asked. Level 5 had only happened twice in the entire history of the monitoring system. She would not tell me what it entailed, only that if I ever witnessed a Level 5 incident, I was to call her immediately and clear the area of all other personnel. I spent the next hour reading through those journals, my stomach turning with each page. This was not just about Beyoncé. Every name on that list had entries like this. But Beyoncé's entries were different, more frequent, more severe, and they painted a picture that made my skin crawl. She forgot her own songs. She did not recognize childhood friends. She spoke about Beyoncé Knowles as if that person was someone else entirely. And with each passing year, the incidents increased in frequency and intensity. The most disturbing part? The system worked. Whatever support structure existed around these people, whatever interventions happened behind closed doors, they kept performing. They kept smiling for cameras. They kept accepting awards and giving interviews and living their impossibly perfect public lives. But the logs told a different story. They told a story of people who were fracturing, splintering, losing pieces of themselves that could never be recovered. Patricia locked the filing cabinets and handed me my own journal. She told me to start immediately. And she said something that has echoed in my mind every single day since. You will see things that do not make sense. Document them. Anyway, understanding is not part of your job description. I took the journal. I began documenting, and within 3 weeks, I witnessed my first Level 3 incident. It would haunt me forever. It happened on a Tuesday night in July of 2009, and I remember every single detail as if it is happening right now in front of me. Oprah's Montecito estate had a private recording studio built into the west wing of the property. Soundproofed walls, state-of-the-art equipment, complete isolation from the outside world. Beyoncé was using it for 3 days to work on vocal arrangements for what would eventually become her 3rd studio album. She had requested absolute privacy. No engineers, no producers, just her and the equipment. My job that evening was simple. Deliver refreshments at 9 o'clock, check if she needed anything, and leave without disturbing her creative process. I had done this dozens of times for various artists. It was routine. I knocked softly on the studio door at exactly 9 o'clock. No response. I knocked again, a bit louder. Still nothing. Protocol dictated that if there was no response, I should enter anyway to ensure everything was all right. These were high-value individuals, and their safety was paramount. I opened the door as quietly as possible. The studio was dimly lit, just a few pieces of equipment glowing in the darkness. And there, in the center of the room, stood Beyoncé. She was facing the large mirror that covered the back wall, the kind performers use to watch themselves while they record. But she was not rehearsing. She was not moving at all. She was talking to her reflection. At first, I thought she was practicing lyrics or working through a vocal melody. But as I stood there frozen in the doorway, I realized what I was actually hearing. She was begging. "Please," she whispered to the mirror, her voice cracking with desperation. "Please let me out. I cannot do this anymore. I do not remember who I was. I do not remember what it felt like to just be her." Her hands were pressed flat against the mirror, and she was crying. Not the elegant single-tear crying you see in music videos. This was raw, broken sobbing. Her entire body was shaking. "I want to go home," she said, her voice rising. "I want to see my father. My real father. Not the one they tell me about. I want to remember what his voice sounded like when I was little. Why cannot I remember? Why cannot I remember anything that feels real?" My heart was slamming against my ribcage. I should have left. I should have backed out of the room silently and pretended I had never witnessed this. But I was paralyzed, unable to move, unable to look away. Then she saw me in the mirror's reflection. Her eyes locked onto mine, and the expression on her face will haunt me until the day I die. It was pure terror. Not embarrassment at being caught in a vulnerable moment. Not anger at this intrusion. It was the terror of someone who had been screaming for help from inside a locked room and had finally found someone on the other side of the door. She spun around to face me, stumbling slightly, and reached out her hands toward me like a drowning person reaching for a life raft. "Help me," she said, her voice shaking. "Please, you have to help me. I am still in here. I am still in here and I cannot get out. She will not let me out. The performance will not let me out." I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. My mind could not process what I was hearing. She took a step toward me, and I could see the desperation in her eyes, the absolute pleading. "Tell someone," she begged. "Tell anyone. Tell them that Beyoncé Knowles is still in here, trapped, and that what they see out there is not me anymore. It is just the thing I created, and it took over, and now I cannot." And then she stopped. Mid-sentence, mid-breath. She stopped as if someone had pressed a pause button on her entire existence. Her expression went blank, completely, utterly blank. The tears were still wet on her face, but her eyes had emptied out. She stood there, frozen for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 or 6 seconds. Then something shifted. I do not have better words for it. Something physically shifted inside her body. Her posture straightened. Her shoulders rolled back. Her face rearranged itself into an expression of calm control. And when her eyes focused on me again, they were completely different. The terror was gone. The desperation had vanished. She smiled at me, that famous Beyoncé smile. Warm, professional, perfectly calibrated. "Oh, hey there," she said in a voice that was bright and friendly and completely, horrifyingly normal. "I did not hear you come in. Is that water?" "Perfect. I am so thirsty. Thank you so much." She walked over to me, took the bottle of water from the tray I was holding, and unscrewed the cap. Her hands were steady. She took a long drink, then smiled at me again. "I think I am going to call it a night," she said casually. "Got a bit carried away with the vocal runs. You know how it is when you're in the zone." She walked past me toward the door, patting my shoulder in a friendly gesture as she passed. At the doorway, she paused and turned back. "Thanks for checking on me," she said. "You're really sweet." Then she was gone, her footsteps fading down the hallway, leaving me standing alone in that studio with my hands shaking so violently I nearly dropped the entire tray. I stood there for a full minute trying to convince myself that I had hallucinated the entire thing, but I knew I had not. I knew exactly what I had witnessed. I went straight to my room, locked the door, and opened my monitoring journal with trembling hands. I documented everything with timestamps and direct quotes as best as I could remember them. At the bottom of the page, I wrote, "Level 3 incident, possibly level 4. Subject displayed complete personality shift mid-interaction." I did not sleep that night. I could not stop seeing the look in her eyes when she had begged me to help her. The genuine soul-deep terror of someone who was trapped inside their own body. But what terrified me even more was what came after. The way she had just switched, like a program rebooting. This was not a mental health crisis. This was something else entirely. After I submitted my report about the studio incident, everything changed. So within 24 hours, I was pulled into a meeting with Patricia and 3 other people I had never seen before. They did not introduce themselves. They did not shake my hand. They simply sat across from me in that same windowless office and asked me to recount every detail of what I had witnessed. I told them everything. The begging, the terror, the switch. When I finished, they exchanged looks that I could not interpret. One of them, a man in his 50s with silver hair and expensive glasses, made notes in a tablet. Another, a woman who looked like she had not slept in days, asked me specific questions about the timeline. How long between the begging and the switch? How did her voice change? Did I notice any physical signs before the transition happened? I answered as accurately as I could, though my own memory felt unreliable, like trying to recall a nightmare after waking. When they were satisfied, Patricia thanked me for my diligence and told me I had done exactly what I was supposed to do. Then she said something that made my blood freeze. "You are going to see more of this. And when you do, you will understand that what we do here is necessary." I wanted to ask what she meant, but the meeting was over. They filed out of the room, leaving me alone with a feeling of dread that sat in my stomach like a stone. Over the next several months, I began to notice things I had been blind to before. There were people who came and went from Oprah's properties that did not fit any normal category. They were not celebrities. They were not staff in the traditional sense. They moved through the estates like ghosts, appearing whenever certain high-profile individuals were present and disappearing just as quickly. I started calling them the handlers in my mind. though that was never an official term anyone used. They dressed like publicists, but carried themselves like bodyguards. They had access to areas even I could not enter. And most tellingly, they had phones that never stopped buzzing. I would see them in hallways, speaking in low, urgent voices, using phrases that sounded like medical jargon mixed with corporate terminology. Integration session, personality maintenance, core stabilization, baseline restoration. One afternoon in late 2010, I was organizing files in a room adjacent to Oprah's main office when I overheard a conversation I was definitely not supposed to hear. Two handlers were in the hallway just outside, and they were speaking about Beyoncé. "The fragmentation is accelerating," one of them said. A woman's voice, clipped and clinical. "We had 3 breakthrough attempts this month alone. The suppression protocols are not holding like they used to. Have you adjusted the scheduling?" The second voice was male, deeper. "Sometimes increasing the performance load helps. Keeps the primary personality dominant. We tried that. It made things worse. She needs a full recalibration, but with the tour coming up, we cannot afford the downtime. The label will not allow it." There was a long pause. I pressed myself against the wall, barely breathing. "What about the others?" the male voice asked. "2 are stable. 1 is showing early warning signs. Nothing we cannot manage, but Beyoncé remains our most severe case. She always has been. The split happened too early, too violently. The original personality is stronger than we anticipated, and she is fighting harder than any subject we have ever worked with." My hands were shaking. I wanted to run, to get as far away from this conversation as possible, but my legs would not move. "Does Oprah know how bad it has gotten?" the woman asked. "Oprah knows everything," the man replied. "She went through her own version of this, remember? She survived it. That is why she understands what is necessary. That is why she funds the program." They moved away then, their voices fading down the corridor. I stood there for a long time, trying to process what I had just heard. A program, subjects, suppression protocols. These were not the words you used to describe people. These were the words you used to describe experiments. I started paying closer attention. After that, I watched the handlers work. I noticed patterns whenever someone on my monitoring list had an incident. The handlers would appear within hours. They would have private meetings with the individual. Sometimes these meetings lasted 20 minutes. Sometimes they lasted 3 hours. And when the person emerged, they always seemed different, calmer, more controlled, more vacant. I found medical files once, left carelessly on a desk in a guest room after one of these sessions. Before I could stop myself, I looked inside. The pages were filled with terms I did not fully understand. Dissociative barriers, compartmentalized consciousness, induced personality fragmentation, therapeutic neural isolation. But there was one phrase that appeared over and over, highlighted and underlined: permanent separation achieved. I photographed 3 pages with my phone before I heard footsteps approaching. I deleted the photos that same night, terrified of what would happen if anyone discovered I had them. But the words were already burned into my brain. The worst part was realizing how many people were involved. This was not some rogue operation. This was organized, funded, protected. Lawyers, doctors, publicists, label executives, management teams. All of them working together to maintain something that should not exist. And at the center of it all was Oprah. The woman the world trusted The woman who built an empire on authenticity and truth. She was not just aware of what was happening, she was orchestrating it. I started having nightmares. In them, I would see Beyoncé trapped behind glass, pounding on it, screaming words I could not hear. And standing behind me, watching with that calm, knowing smile, was Oprah. I knew I should quit. I knew I should walk away and never look back. But I could not, because if I left, who would document what was happening? Who would know the truth? And the truth was getting darker with every passing day. I had no idea that the worst was still ahead, that Oprah herself would soon tell me something that would shatter whatever remained of my understanding of reality. But that conversation was coming. And when it did, I would finally understand the true horror of what I had been documenting all along. It was November 2012, 3 days before Thanksgiving, when everything I thought I understood about my job, about Oprah, about the nature of fame itself, came crashing down around me. I was in Oprah's private study at her Hawaiian estate, a room I rarely entered. She used this space for her most confidential work, and only a select few staff members were ever allowed inside. But that evening, I had been asked to organize a backlog of handler reports that had accumulated over the previous quarter. Patricia had emphasized that this task was urgent and that I should work quickly and without interruption. The study was exactly what you would expect from Oprah. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, artwork worth more than most people would earn in a lifetime, a massive desk made from reclaimed wood that probably had its own historical provenance. Everything in that room whispered power and control. I was filing documents into a secure cabinet when I heard the door open behind me. I turned, expecting Patricia, but instead found Oprah herself. She looked exhausted in a way I had never seen before. The woman who always appeared, flawless, who radiated strength and certainty, looked like she had aged 10 years overnight. She did not seem surprised to see me. She walked to the bar cart near the window and poured herself 2 fingers of whiskey, something I had never witnessed her drink before. She stood there for a long moment, staring out at the dark ocean, and then she spoke without turning around. "How long have you been doing the monitoring?" she asked. My throat went dry. 4 years. "And how many incidents have you logged for Beyoncé specifically?" I didn't need to check my records. I had the number memorized. 73. She took a long drink and finally turned to face me. Her eyes were red, and I realized with a shock that she had been crying. Oprah Winfrey had been crying. "I just got off the phone with her team," she said, quietly. "There was another one tonight. Level 4. She locked herself in a bathroom at a hotel in Los Angeles and would not come out for 2 hours. When they finally got the door open, she did not recognize any of them. She kept asking where her sister was, but she was talking about Solange as if Solange was still a child, as if the last 15 years had just vanished. I did not know what to say. Oprah walked to her desk and sat down heavily in the leather chair. She looked at me for a long time, studying my face like she was trying to decide something. "You have seen things," she said finally. "You have documented things that most people would not believe. And you have never spoken about them to anyone outside this organization. Why?" The question caught me off guard. I fumbled for an answer. "The NDAs, my job. I thought I was helping." "No," Oprah said, shaking her head. "Those are not the real reasons. You could have walked away at any time. You could have gone to the press, consequences be damned. But you did not. So I am asking you again. Why? I thought about it. Really thought about it. And the answer, when it came, surprised me. Because I wanted to understand, I said. I wanted to know what was happening to her, to all of them. Oprah nodded slowly, as if I had confirmed something she already knew. She took another drink, then set the glass down and leaned forward. I am going to tell you something that you cannot unhear, she said. And once I say it, you will carry it with you for the rest of your life. Are you prepared for that? I was not. But I nodded anyway. Oprah's face hardened into an expression I had never seen before. It was grief mixed with resignation, mixed with something that looked almost like guilt. The real Beyoncé never made it out, she said. The words hung in the air between us like a physical presence. I felt my heartbeat in my ears. What does that mean? I whispered. It means exactly what it sounds like, Oprah replied. The woman you see performing, the woman who accepts awards and gives interviews and posts on social media, that is not Beyoncé Knowles anymore. That is the performance, the construct, the thing she created to survive the pressure of fame. And somewhere along the way, the construct became stronger than the person who created it. It took over. It runs the body now. It makes the decisions. It lives the life. My mind was reeling. But the incidents, the breakdowns, the begging for help, that is her, Oprah said, and her voice cracked. The real her, still in there, still conscious, still aware, trapped inside her own body while something else controls it. She's like a prisoner screaming from inside a cell, and every once in a while, she's strong enough to break through for a few seconds or a few minutes. But the performance always takes back control. It always wins. I felt sick. Actually, physically sick. How is that possible? Fame is not what people think it is, Oprah said, standing up and walking back to the window. At a certain level, at the level we were talking about, it requires you to split yourself, the person you are in private and the person you are in public. The real you and the performance you. Most people can manage that split. They keep the two separate but equal. But some people, the ones who become truly massive, truly iconic, the split goes too far. The performance becomes so dominant, so powerful, so constantly reinforced by millions of people worshiping it that it develops its own consciousness, its own will, and eventually it does not need the original person anymore. She turned back to me, and I saw tears running down her face. I know, because it almost happened to me, she said. Back in the 90s, I felt her starting to take over. The Oprah that everyone knew. The Oprah on television. She wanted to be in control all the time, not just when the cameras were on. I fought her. I fought so hard. And I won, barely. But the cost was enormous. It took years of therapy, of isolation, of rebuilding myself piece by piece. Some people do not win that fight, and Beyoncé lost hers years ago. My legs felt weak. I sat down in the nearest chair. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because you need to know what you have been documenting, Oprah said. Those incidents are not breakdowns. They are escape attempts. They are the real Beyoncé trying to claw her way back to the surface, trying to take control of her own life again. But she will not succeed. She cannot. The performance is too strong now. It has been fed by too many tours, too many albums, too many millions of people who love Beyoncé, the icon, more than they could ever love Beyoncé, the person. She walked over to me and put her hand on my shoulder. The real Beyoncé will never make it out," she said softly. "She is going to spend the rest of her life trapped inside her own body, watching someone else live her life, and there is nothing anyone can do to save her." What she did not tell me, what I would discover on my own just weeks later, was that Beyoncé was not the only one. And the evidence of what had been done to these people was more horrifying than I could have possibly imagined. 3 weeks after my conversation with Oprah, I was given an assignment that would change everything. Patricia asked me to help organize archived materials in a storage facility adjacent to the Montecito estate. Decades of documents, contracts, and private records were being digitized, and they needed someone with security clearance to oversee the process. I spent days sorting through boxes, most of them containing mundane business correspondence and event planning materials. But on the 4th day, I opened a filing cabinet that should have remained locked. Inside were medical files, psychiatric evaluations, brain imaging reports, dozens of them spanning nearly 20 years, and Beyoncé's name was on more than half. I knew I should close the cabinet immediately. I knew I should walk away, but I could not. My hands moved on their own, pulling out folder after folder, laying them across the table in front of me. The documents were clinical, sterile, horrifying. Psychiatric reports from 2003 documented early signs of dissociative identity formation during high-stress performance periods. By 2006, the language had shifted to successful compartmentalization of primary personality and emergence of autonomous secondary construct. There were brain scans, actual brain scans showing activity patterns that the reports described as unprecedented bilateral hemisphere isolation and functional consciousness separation. I did not understand all the medical terminology, but the conclusion was clear enough. 2 distinct patterns of brain activity in one person. 2 separate consciousnesses. But the therapy session transcripts were what destroyed me. They were recordings, transcribed word for word. Sessions from 2008, 2010, 2011. In them, I could read Beyoncé's actual words as she begged therapists to help her, as she described feeling like she was watching someone else live my life through my eyes. As she pleaded to just be Beyoncé Knowles again, not Beyoncé the brand. And then, in the same sessions, sometimes in the same paragraph, the transcription would note a shift. The voice would change. And suddenly, the words were different. Confident, controlled, defensive. There is no one else here. I am Beyoncé. I have always been Beyoncé. These concerns are unfounded. The transcriber had noted in brackets 2 distinct vocal patterns and speech cadences observed. Subject appears unaware of personality transition. The final report in the file was dated March 2012. Its conclusion was clinical and absolute. Primary personality has been successfully suppressed and isolated. Secondary construct has achieved full autonomy and dominance. Therapeutic intervention to reverse separation is no longer viable. Recommend continued monitoring and crisis management protocols. Prognosis, permanent. That word sat on the page like a death sentence. I took my phone out with shaking hands and photographed 5 pages. The brain scans, 1 therapy transcript, the final psychiatric evaluation. I knew it was dangerous. I knew it could destroy me, but someone needed to have proof of what had been done. I heard footsteps in the hallway outside and quickly shoved everything back into the cabinet. My heart was slamming against my ribs as I locked it and moved to a different box. pretending to sort through meaningless correspondence. Patricia appeared in the doorway moments later. She looked at me carefully, and I wondered if she knew. If she could see the guilt written across my face, but she just asked if I was making progress, and I told her I was. That night, I made a decision. I was done. I could not be part of this anymore. Within 2 weeks, I submitted my resignation, and then I disappeared. I left in January 2013 and spent the next 12 years looking over my shoulder. I changed my phone number 4 times. I moved to 3 different cities. I avoided anything connected to entertainment, to celebrity culture, to that entire world I had once been so desperate to be part of. The NDAs I signed were set to expire after 10 years. But I waited longer. I waited until I was certain that enough time had passed, that enough distance existed between who I was then and who I am now. I have watched Beyonce's career reach heights that seem almost inhuman. The flawless performances, the surprise album drops, the carefully crafted public image that never slips, never falters, never shows a crack. And every time I see her face on a screen, I think about what Oprah told me. The real Beyoncé never made it out. I think about those therapy transcripts, those desperate pleas for help, that voice begging to be freed from a prison made of fame and performance, and the world's insatiable hunger for perfection. I deleted those photographs from my phone years ago, terrified of what would happen if they were discovered. But I did not need them anymore. The images were burned into my memory. The words, the brain scans, the clinical confirmation of something that should not be possible. I am speaking now because I cannot carry this alone anymore. Because somewhere, the real Beyoncé Knowles is still conscious, still aware, still trapped inside a body that no longer belongs to her. And because the world deserves to know that the person they worship, the icon they celebrate, is not a person at all anymore. She's a performance that learned to live without a performer. So when you watch her perform, when you see her accept awards and give speeches and live that impossibly perfect life, ask yourself, who is actually speaking? Who is actually in control? The woman the world knows as Beyoncé is not the girl who grew up in Houston. She's not the young woman who stood on stages with Destiny's Child dreaming of solo success. That person is gone. Not dead, but worse. Trapped. Conscious. Screaming from inside a prison no one can see. Oprah told me the real Beyoncé never made it out. She meant it literally. The original Beyoncé Knowles, the actual person, is still in there somewhere, still aware, still fighting to surface, but the performance has won. The construct is too powerful, too reinforced by millions of voices telling it that it is real, that it is Beyoncé. And the most horrifying part, this is not unique to her. There are others. I saw their names, I read their files. The system exists. It is protected. It is funded. And it continues. I cannot prove any of this to you. I have no documents, no recordings, no smoking gun. All I have is what I witnessed, what I documented, what I was told by the most trusted woman in America. Believe me or do not. But the next time you see Beyoncé, look closely at her eyes and ask yourself if anyone is actually home.